Hello, my friend. If you are listening to me right now, you have done a good thing. You have decided to rest. Whatever the day has been long, or hard, or full of small troubles that piled up one on top of another, it is over now. The day is over. The world outside your window has gone quiet. The night has come, and here you are. You are here, in your bed, or on your sofa, or in the soft chair where you sit at the end of the day, and you have made one of the kindest decisions a person can make. You have decided to let yourself be still. You have decided to listen to a story. I am so very glad you are here. Tonight, I want to tell you a story that I love very much. It was written more than 100 years ago by a quiet woman who lived on a small green island off the eastern coast of Canada. An island where the soil is red and the sea is everywhere, and the apple trees bloom in May with such a sweetness that the whole island smells, for a few weeks, like a great country wedding. The woman who wrote this story was named Lucy Maud Montgomery. She was a teacher. She lived with her grandmother in a small farmhouse. She wrote late at night by lamplight after her work was done. And one night, late, by the small yellow light of that lamp, she began to write about a little girl with red hair, a little girl who talked too much, a little girl who imagined too much, a little girl who, by mistake, was sent to a small farm where two old people had been expecting a boy. The story is called Anne of Green Gables. You may have heard it before, maybe as a child, maybe in a film, maybe in a book your grandmother once read aloud to you in the long, quiet afternoons of summer. That is all right. It is the kind of story that is meant to be heard many times. Each time, you hear it differently. Each time, you find something new in it. Tonight, I am going to tell it to you slowly. So slowly that, if you fall asleep in the middle, you will not miss anything important. The story will still be there. The story will wait for you. That is the point of this kind of telling. The point is not to keep you awake. The point is to walk with you, gently, into sleep. The point is to be a soft voice in the room, while your breath slows, and your shoulders drop, and your hands let go of everything they have been holding all day. Before I begin, my friend, I would like to ask you for one small thing, just one. Somewhere on your screen there is a small red button, the subscribe button. If you have not already, please tap it, gently, just once. The way you might place a hand on a sleeping child's forehead to make sure they are not too warm. That small tap is how the next story finds you. On the next long night, when you need a voice in the dark again, and you do not know where to find one, I will be there. The next story will be there, waiting for you, the way a small lamp is waiting in the window when you come home very late. And if you would like to, also tap the small heart, the like button. It is a quiet way of saying, I am here, I am listening. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. I do not need any more than that. That is everything. Take your time. There is no hurry. Tap when you are ready. I will wait. Good. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for letting me into your evening. Now, let me carry you very gently across an ocean. Let me carry you to a small green island where, on a warm afternoon in early summer, more than 100 years ago, an old man named Matthew Cuthbert was hitching up his horse to drive to the train station. He was about to make a mistake, the mistake of his life. A very good mistake, but he did not know it yet. Matthew Cuthbert was a shy man. He was 60 years old. He had gray hair and a long gray beard and gentle brown eyes. He had lived all his life on a small farm called Green Gables with his sister Marilla. He had never married. He had never wanted to. Matthew was a man who could not bear to talk to women, or to children, or to strangers, or, really, to anyone except his sister, his horse, and the few farm animals who lived on his land. He was a quiet man, a kind man, a man who looked at the ground when he walked, and who blushed easily, and who said as few words as possible. He had never, in his 60 years, gone to a town meeting. He had never sat next to a woman at church. He had never even in his whole life bought a new shirt by himself. His sister Marilla bought all his shirts for him. So you can imagine, my friend, how strange it was that Matthew Cuthbert was, on this warm afternoon in early summer, driving alone to the train station to pick up a child. It had been Marilla's idea. Marilla was Matthew's sister. She was a thin woman, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and a sharp tongue and a sharper mind. She had decided, the month before, that Matthew was getting old, that Green Gables needed help, that a strong young boy would be useful to help Matthew with the chores and to learn the farm and to be a comfort to them both in their old age. So Marilla had written to an orphanage on the mainland. She had asked them to send a boy, about 10 or 11 years old, a good, sturdy, quiet boy who would be useful around a farm. The orphanage had written back. They would send a boy. He would arrive on the late afternoon train on the 2nd of June. And so, on the 2nd of June, Matthew Cuthbert was driving to the train station to meet a boy he had never seen. He was not looking forward to it. He did not know what to say to a boy. He did not know how to be friendly. He did not know how to make small talk. He was going to bring the boy home, and Marilla would do the rest. That was the plan. The drive to the station was a beautiful one. Matthew did not always notice beautiful things, but he noticed today that the apple trees along the road were just past their blossoms. Small green apples were beginning to grow on the branches, where the white flowers had been only weeks before. The grass was a soft, deep green. The sky was a clear, bright blue. There were small white clouds, drifting like sailing ships across the blue. The horse trotted along, with its bell ringing softly. Matthew drove past small white farmhouses. He drove past fields where cows were grazing. He drove past the red dirt road that everyone on Prince Edward Island calls the most beautiful red in the world. It was a beautiful day. Even Matthew, who did not often think about such things, could feel that. He reached the station. He tied his horse to a post. He walked slowly to the platform. The station master was there. He looked at Matthew with some surprise. Matthew Cuthbert never came to the station. "Train's been and gone, Matthew," said the station master, "half an hour ago. But there is a passenger waiting for you. She is on the bench, on the other end of the platform." A passenger waiting for him? Matthew was confused. "A she?" he said. "Yes," said the station master, "a little girl. I tried to tell her there must be some mistake, but she was very firm. She said she was expected at Green Gables." A girl. Matthew Cuthbert stood very still. He felt, suddenly, that he might faint. A little girl. He had come to pick up a boy. The orphanage was supposed to send a boy. And here was a little girl, sitting on a bench, waiting for him. For a long moment, Matthew thought about turning around and going home. He thought about saying to the station master, "It is a mistake. Send her back." He thought about getting in his buggy and driving away. But then, he turned his head. He looked, for the first time, down the platform, and he saw her. She was sitting on a long wooden bench. Her feet did not reach the floor. They swung, slowly, just above the platform. She was thin, very thin. She was wearing a very ugly yellow-gray dress, made of stiff cotton. The dress was too small. Her arms, sticking out of the short sleeves, were thin and freckled. Her hair was red, bright red, carrot red. The reddest red Matthew Cuthbert had ever seen. It was tied in two tight braids that hung down her back. She had a small, thin face. She had a small, thin chin. She had a wide mouth. Her eyes were big, so big that they seemed to take up most of her face. The eyes were gray, or green, or, depending on how the light hit them, hazel. Matthew could not tell. She was looking around at everything, at the platform, at the small piles of luggage, at the sky, at the trees, at the small flowers growing between the cracks in the platform boards. She was, Matthew could see, taking it all in. She had not seen him yet. He watched her for a moment. He saw that she was holding, on her lap, a small old carpet bag. It contained, he supposed, everything she owned in the world. He saw that she had pinned on her dress a small tin badge that said something, maybe her name. He saw that, although she was a small, thin, freckled child in an ugly dress, there was something about her that was not ordinary. There was something in the way she was looking at things, the way her mouth was open, just a little, as if she could not believe how beautiful it all was, the way her eyes were so wide, the way she sat with her hands clasped in her lap, very still, as if she was trying to hold herself together because she was so excited. He could not, for the life of him, have explained what he saw. But he saw something, and he found, to his very great surprise, that he could not just leave her there. He started, slowly, to walk toward her. She heard his footsteps. She turned her head. Her eyes lit up. A wide smile spread across her small, thin face. "You must be Mr. Cuthbert of Green Gables," she said. Her voice was clear and sweet and full of joy. She jumped down from the bench. She picked up her carpet bag. She walked toward him with her thin hand stuck out, ready to be shaken. "I am very glad to see you," she said. "I was beginning to be afraid you were not coming for me. I was imagining all the things that might have happened to prevent you. I had decided that if you did not come tonight, I would go down the track to the big wild cherry tree at the bend and climb up into it to stay all night. I would not be a bit afraid. It would be lovely to sleep in a wild cherry tree, all white with bloom in the moonshine. Do not you think? Anyway, you have come, so I do not have to do that, and I am ever so happy." Matthew took her thin hand awkwardly. He shook it. He did not know what to say. He did not say anything. The little girl talked on. She seemed not to need him to talk. "I am ready to go now," she said. "Oh, it seems wonderful that I am going to live with you and belong to you. I have never belonged to anybody, not really. The orphanage was the worst, though. I have only been in it 4 months, but that was enough. I do not suppose you ever were an orphan in an asylum, so you cannot possibly understand what it is like. Oh, it is just terrible. They were kind, you know, the teachers and the matron, but there is so little chance to use your imagination in an asylum. Anyway, I am going to live in your home now. Where is the buggy? I would like to put my carpet bag in it, if you please." Matthew, in a kind of daze, took her carpet bag. He led her to the buggy. He helped her in. She was so light that he could have lifted her with one hand. She had no weight at all. He climbed in beside her. He picked up the reins. He clicked his tongue. The horse started to walk. The little girl let out a long, slow breath. "Oh," she said. "Oh, isn't it wonderful?" Matthew did not answer. He was trying very hard to think. He was trying to think about what to do. There had been a mistake. The orphanage had sent a girl. Marilla would be furious. They would have to send the girl back. But Matthew could not bring himself to tell her, not yet, that there had been a mistake. He thought, perhaps, that he would let her have the drive home. Let her have the lovely drive. Let her have one nice evening, before the bad news came. Then, in the morning, they could think about what to do. So they drove on, and the little girl began to talk. Her name, she told him, was Anne. Anne with an E. She said this part of her name was very important. Anne was a much more dignified spelling than Anne, she said. If you were going to be called Anne, it should be Anne with an E. She said it as if it was the most serious thing in the world. Matthew nodded. "Anne with an E," he repeated quietly. He did not want to upset her. She seemed pleased that he had said it back. "Yes," she said. "It is so much nicer. Do you not think? Anne is such a homely little name. But Anne with an E has a sort of distinguished air about it. Do you understand?" Matthew said, yes, though he did not, really. She talked about everything. She talked about the orphanage. She talked about her parents, who had died of fever when she was a baby. She talked about Mrs. Thomas, who had taken her in, who had 8 children of her own, all younger than Anne. She talked about Mr. Thomas, who had drunk too much and had been killed when he was run over by a train. She talked about Mrs. Hammond, the next woman who had taken her in, who had needed someone to look after her twins. There had been 3 sets of twins in that house. Anne had looked after them all. She told Matthew that twins were lovely the first time you had them, but the second and third sets were a great deal of work. Mrs. Hammond's husband had died too. Then Anne had gone to the orphanage. She had been at the orphanage for 4 months. Now she was here. She told all of this in a voice that was not exactly sad. Anne was not, Matthew was beginning to realize, a sad girl. She had had a very hard life. By the standards of most people, a tragic life. She had been alone and unwanted and worked too hard and never loved properly. But Anne herself did not seem to know this, or, if she knew it, she had decided not to let it touch her. She was full of joy. She was full of imagination. She had built inside herself a world of beautiful things to make up for the world outside, which had not been very kind to her. She talked, as the buggy rolled along, about all the beautiful things she was seeing. "Oh, Mr. Cuthbert," she would say, "look at that field of clover. Have you ever seen anything so soft? It looks like a great green pillow that the angels might come down and rest on when they are tired. Oh, Mr. Cuthbert, look at that little pond. The wild ducks are sitting on it. They look like little ladies having tea, do they not? Oh, Mr. Cuthbert, look at that wild rose bush. It is just covered in pink flowers. Could anything be lovelier?" Matthew did not, usually, notice such things. But, with Anne pointing at them, with Anne's wide eyes shining, with Anne's voice full of wonder, he began to notice. He saw the clover. He saw the wild ducks. He saw the wild rose bush. And he saw, perhaps for the first time, how beautiful it was. The road he had driven 1,000 times. The fields he had passed 1,000 times. He had stopped seeing them years ago. But now, with this strange little girl beside him, telling him to look, the world was new again. It was like he was driving down the road for the first time. He listened to her talk. He did not interrupt. She did not seem to mind that he was quiet. After a while, they came to a long road that was lined, on both sides, with apple trees. The apple trees met overhead. Their branches touched, making a long green tunnel. It was the most beautiful part of the road. The apple blossoms had not all fallen yet. Some white flowers still hung on the trees. They drifted down, every few moments, in the soft afternoon wind, like soft snow. The light coming through the trees was soft and green and gold. Anne stopped talking. Matthew looked at her. She had her face turned up. She had stopped breathing, almost. Her eyes were wide. She was looking at the apple trees with such an expression on her face that Matthew, watching her, felt suddenly that he might cry, though he did not know why. The buggy moved slowly through the tunnel of apple trees. Anne did not say a word. When they came out, at the other end of the tunnel, into the open road again, Anne let out her breath. She did not speak for a long time. Matthew did not interrupt. Finally, in a soft, almost whispered voice, Anne said, "Mr. Cuthbert, that place, that beautiful place, what is its name?" "It does not have a name," said Matthew. "Folks just call it the Avenue. It is a pretty bit of road. Mr. Bell's apple trees. They have been there for 40 years, I reckon." "It needs a name," Anne said. "It is not enough just to call it the Avenue. That is so ordinary. Something so beautiful needs a real name. Let me see. Let me think." She thought. She thought with her thin face tilted up, her small chin pointed at the sky, her wide eyes far away. After a long moment she said, "I shall call it The White Way of Delight." Matthew did not say anything for a while. He thought about it. The White Way of Delight. It was a fancy name, maybe a silly name. He would never himself call a road such a name. He would have been laughed at. But for this little girl, this strange little girl, with her wide eyes and her wide imagination, the name was perfect. The road was a white way of delight. She had named it. She had given it a name that fit. A name that no one had ever thought of. In all the 40 years that road had been there. "That is a nice name," Matthew said quietly. Anne turned her head. She looked at him. She smiled. A wide, happy smile. "Do you really think so?" she said. "Oh, I am so glad. I was afraid you might think it was silly. Most people, when I name things, think I am being silly, but I cannot help it. Things need names. Otherwise, how would you remember them properly?" Matthew nodded. "How would you indeed," he said. He had never, in his life, named anything. Not really. He had named his cows and his horse, but those were just normal names. Beauty, Old Joe, Brownie. He had never named a road. He had never named a tree. He had never given a fancy name to a beautiful place. But Anne did. Anne named everything. And, in the days and weeks to come, Anne would name a great many things at Green Gables. A pond would become Willowmere. A small wood on the farm would become the Haunted Wood. A small flowing brook would become the Dryad's Bubble. A wild cherry tree outside Anne's bedroom window would become the Snow Queen. Anne saw, in every ordinary thing, a name, a story, a reason to love it. She had been doing this all her short life, to make her sad life feel bigger, to make the small, ugly places she had lived in feel like castles, to make the days when she was alone in an attic at Mrs. Hammond's, looking after 3 sets of twins, feel like she was a princess in a tower. Imagination, Anne had told Matthew earlier, was the most important thing in the world. She said, "Mr. Cuthbert, if you can imagine that things are beautiful, you can stand a great deal of life that is not." Matthew had said nothing to that, but he had thought about it for a long time. The sun was beginning to set as they came over the last hill before Green Gables. The whole world was turning gold. The fields were gold. The trees were gold. The clouds were gold. The road was gold. Anne could see, in the distance, a small white house on a little hill. Behind the house, there was a long apple orchard, just past blossoms. There were tall pine trees behind the orchard. There was a small barn. There were green fields rolling down to the road. It was the most peaceful, most beautiful place Anne had ever seen. She did not know, yet, what it was. "Mr. Cuthbert," she said, in a soft voice, "what is that house? The white one there, on the hill, with the apple trees, with the green fields?" Matthew slowed the buggy. He pointed with his old hand. "That," he said. "Anne, that is Green Gables." Anne stopped breathing. She stared. Green Gables, the place she was going to live. The white house with the apple trees. The house with the green fields. The house with the pine trees behind it. It was hers. For tonight, at least. Even if the mistake was discovered tomorrow, and they had to send her back to the orphanage, for tonight, this beautiful house on this beautiful hill was hers. She would live in it. She would walk through its rooms. She would sleep for one night in one of its small bedrooms. She would have, for one night, a home. 2 great tears ran down Anne's thin, freckled cheeks. She did not wipe them away. She did not say anything. Matthew, glancing at her, saw the tears. He did not know what to do. He had no idea what to do with a crying child. He just kept driving, very slowly, very gently, toward the White House on the hill. The buggy rolled down the small dirt lane that led to Green Gables. The smell of the apple trees, and the warm hay in the barn, and the cooking from the kitchen came out to meet them. Anne breathed it in. With her wide eyes still full of tears, she breathed in the smell of Green Gables for the first time. She knew, even before she had set foot inside the house, that this was the place she had been waiting for all her life. She did not know, of course, that there had been a mistake. She did not know that Marilla, the woman who had asked for a boy, was waiting in the kitchen, ready to send her back the next morning. She did not know that her time at Green Gables, before she had even properly begun, was supposed to be only one night. She only knew that, for tonight, she was home. She only knew that, for tonight, she could imagine she belonged here. She only knew with all her thin, tired, brave little heart that she did not ever want to leave. The buggy stopped in front of the door. Matthew climbed down. He came around. He held out his hand. Anne took his hand. She climbed down. She stood in the small green yard of Green Gables. She held Matthew's hand for a moment with both of her small hands. "Thank you, Mr. Cuthbert," she whispered. She did not say what she was thanking him for. Maybe for the ride. Maybe for not interrupting her while she talked. Maybe for letting her name the road. Maybe for not knowing yet that she would have to be sent back. Maybe for everything. Matthew did not know what to say. He just nodded. He led her, in his shy, quiet way, up the small wooden steps to the door of Green Gables. He opened the door. He led her inside. He called out in his soft voice, "Marilla, I am home. I am back from the station." There were footsteps from the kitchen. A tall, thin woman appeared. She had gray hair in a tight bun. She had sharp gray eyes. She was wiping her hands on a clean white apron. She stopped in the middle of the hall when she saw what Matthew had brought home. She stared at the little girl. The little girl stared back. Marilla looked at Matthew. Her eyes, even sharper now, said, "What is this? Where is the boy? Who is this girl?" Matthew, his face very red, opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. "Marilla," he said, in his smallest voice, "there has been a mistake." He paused. Then he said, very gently and with surprising firmness given how shy he was, "But she is here. Her name is Anne, Anne with an E. And I think we should let her stay for tonight. We can think, in the morning, about what to do." Marilla looked at him. She looked at Anne. Anne was looking up at her with those huge eyes, eyes that were trying not to cry, eyes that were trying to be brave. Marilla, who was a strict woman, who was a practical woman, who had no patience with foolishness, opened her mouth. She was going to say, "Nonsense, we are not keeping her. We will send her back tomorrow." But the words did not come out. She looked at the small, thin, freckled girl. She looked at the carpet bag, full of her sad little belongings. She looked at her thin arms and her ugly dress. Marilla, in spite of herself, felt something stir. Something small, something almost gone. A feeling she had not felt in many years. A feeling like pity, a feeling like protectiveness. A feeling that, for tonight, this very small, very tired, very brave little girl could not be sent back into the dark. "Very well," Marilla said. Her voice was sharp, but not as sharp as usual. "She will stay for the night. We will sort it out tomorrow." She turned away. She walked, briskly, back to the kitchen. "Come along, child," she called over her shoulder. "Supper is on the table. Come and eat something." Anne, still holding Matthew's old hand, walked into the kitchen of Green Gables. She did not know what would happen tomorrow. She did not know if she would be allowed to stay, but she was, for tonight, going to eat at this table. She was, for tonight, going to sleep in a small bedroom up the stairs. She was, for tonight, home. And tonight, my friend, is enough for one little girl who has never had a home in her life. Tonight was enough. Tonight was a miracle. Tonight, this very strange, very unexpected, very wonderful night was the beginning of everything. I will pause here, my dear listener, for just a moment. I want to make sure you are comfortable. Are your feet warm? If they are not, please reach for an extra blanket. You will sleep better with warm feet. Is your pillow in the right position? You can adjust it now, gently. Take your time. Are your shoulders relaxed? Let them drop just a little more. You have been holding them all day without realizing it. You can let them go now. Is your breath deep or shallow? See if you can let it be deep. Let it fill the whole of your chest, and then let it out, slowly, slowly, like a soft sigh. Good. Now we will continue. The little girl with the red hair has come to Green Gables. She has had her first night there. Tomorrow morning she will wake up in a small bedroom, in a small bed, in a house full of apple trees and old quiet kindness. And tomorrow, my friend, the real story will begin. Anne woke up the next morning in a small white bedroom under the eaves of Green Gables. For a moment, she did not know where she was. She blinked at the ceiling. The ceiling was a soft, slanted white. There was a small, round window in the wall that she had not noticed the night before. The sun was coming in through the window. It was making a small, bright square of gold on the wooden floor. Then she remembered. Green Gables, the White House on the hill, the apple trees, the kind, quiet man, the sharp, gray-haired woman, the supper, where she had been too excited to eat much. She sat up in bed. She looked around the small room. The room was almost empty. There was a small wooden bed with a white quilt. There was a small wooden chair. There was a small wooden table with a white pitcher and a white basin for washing. There was a small braided rug on the floor. It was the plainest, simplest, most ordinary little bedroom in the world. But to Anne, it was a palace. She climbed out of bed. She walked in her bare feet to the small round window. She looked out, and she gasped. Outside the window, just at her shoulder, was a great cherry tree. It was so close that, if she had reached out her hand, she could have touched its branches. The tree was covered with white blossoms, thousands of them. The branches were so full of white flowers that you could hardly see the green leaves underneath. It looked, Anne thought, like the whole tree was wearing a bridal gown. She put her hands on the small window frame. She pressed her thin, freckled face against the glass. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, you beautiful tree. You beautiful, beautiful tree." She stood at the window for a long time. She did not move. She just looked. She thought, perhaps, that she would call this tree the Snow Queen because it was as white as snow, and it was as beautiful as a queen, she decided. The Snow Queen, that would be its name. She had named her first thing at Green Gables. She had marked it as hers. She turned around, slowly, in the small room. She thought, "I do not want to leave this house. I do not want to go back to the orphanage. I want, with everything in me, to stay here forever. To wake up every morning in this little room with the Snow Queen looking in the window. But I am going to be sent back. I know I am." She walked very slowly to the chair. She put on her ugly yellow-gray dress. She brushed her red hair. She braided it into 2 tight braids, the way she had been taught at the orphanage. She went downstairs. She moved very quietly. She did not want to disturb anyone. She found Marilla in the kitchen. Marilla was making porridge. She had her sleeves rolled up. She was stirring a great pot on the stove. She looked up when Anne came in. "Good morning, Anne," she said. Her voice was a little softer than it had been the night before. "Good morning, ma'am," said Anne. "Did you sleep well?" "Oh, yes, ma'am. I slept beautifully. I had such lovely dreams. I imagined I was a princess in a castle, in a tower, looking out at a great white tree. But then I woke up, and there really was a great white tree. The most beautiful tree I have ever seen. I have decided to call it the Snow Queen. I hope you do not mind, ma'am." Marilla looked at her. She did not say anything for a moment. She went back to stirring the porridge. "You may call it whatever you like," she said. It was not a warm thing to say, but it was not a cold thing either. It was perhaps the very best Marilla could do. Marilla had not slept well herself. She had lain awake half the night, thinking about the little girl in the spare room, thinking about what to do, thinking about the strange way she had felt the night before, when she had looked at the small, thin face and could not bring herself to send the child back into the dark. She had decided finally that she would not make a decision right away. She had decided, drive Anne back to Mrs. Spencer, the woman who had brought Anne from the orphanage. They would talk to Mrs. Spencer. They would figure out what had happened. There had been a mistake. They had asked for a boy. Mrs. Spencer would have to know where to send Anne now. So that was the plan. But Marilla had not told Anne yet. She did not want to ruin the child's breakfast. "Sit down, Anne. Eat your porridge." Anne sat down. She picked up her spoon. She ate, very politely, the way she had been taught at the orphanage. She did not slurp. She did not make a sound. She kept her elbows off the table. Marilla watched her, out of the corner of her eye. The child was a very polite child. That was something, polite and quiet, and not at all the wild thing Marilla had expected after the talking and the imagination of the previous night. Anne ate her whole bowl of porridge. When she was done, she said, "Thank you, ma'am. That was very good porridge." Marilla nodded. "Anne," she said. Her voice was careful. "After breakfast, I am going to ask you to put on your hat. We are going to drive to see Mrs. Spencer. She is the woman who brought you here from the orphanage. There has been, as you know, a mistake. We asked for a boy. You are not a boy. We need to find out what to do." Anne looked at her. Her face went very still. Her huge eyes filled with tears. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, in a very small voice, "You are going to send me back to the orphanage." Marilla did not answer. She did not say yes, but she did not say no. Anne's tears spilled over. They rolled down her thin, freckled cheeks. They fell, plop, plop, onto the table. "I knew it," Anne whispered. "I knew it was too good to be true. I knew Green Gables was too beautiful to be mine. Of course I have to go back, of course." She wiped her face with her thin hand. She stood up. She picked up her empty porridge bowl. She carried it carefully to the sink. She washed it. She put it on the drying rack. She turned around. She looked at Marilla. "I am ready," she said. "I will go and get my hat." Then she walked, very straight, very small, very proud, out of the kitchen. Marilla, watching her go, felt something twist, hard, inside her chest. She had not expected this. She had expected screaming, crying, begging, wild scenes. She had not expected this very quiet, very dignified, very heartbroken little girl washing her own porridge bowl and walking out of the kitchen. Marilla stood at the sink for a long time after Anne had gone. She did not move. She felt, in her chest, the strangest feeling. She was an old woman. She was a hard woman. She had been a practical woman all her life. But she felt, in this moment, that she might cry. She had not cried since her mother had died, many years ago. She bit her lip. She did not cry, but she felt it. The drive to Mrs. Spencer's was a long one. Anne sat in the buggy beside Marilla. She did not talk. It was the first time since Anne had come that she had not talked. Marilla, who had thought she would be glad of the silence, found that she was not. She found that she missed the talking. She found, with a kind of strange, sad surprise, that she had wanted to hear what Anne would say about the morning, about the sky, about the trees, about the fields they drove past. But Anne was silent. Anne was sitting very straight, with her hands folded in her lap. She was looking at the road. She was not looking around. She had stopped looking at the world. There was no point, now. The world she was looking at was no longer hers. She would go back to the orphanage. She would go back to the gray walls, and the gray porridge, and the gray bed in the gray dormitory with 30 other gray girls. There would be no Snow Queen there. There would be no White Way of Delight. There would be no Green Gables. She would have to put it all away. Every beautiful thing she had seen in the last day, she would have to fold up like a fine dress and put away in a small box in her mind. To take out, sometimes, when she was alone, to look at, to remember. She could do this. She had done it before. She had been doing it her whole life, but it was very hard, and she was very tired. Marilla, glancing at her, saw all of this on Anne's small face. She did not see it because Anne told her. She saw it because, sometimes, a face tells more than any words. They drove on, in silence, for an hour. Then Marilla said, in a careful voice, "Anne, tell me about yourself." Anne looked at her, surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Tell me anything. Tell me about the orphanage. Tell me about the families you have lived with. Tell me about your life." Anne thought. She did not, often, talk about her life. The real life. The hard parts. She usually told only the beautiful parts. The parts she had made up. The parts she had imagined. But Marilla was looking at her with a different kind of look than before. A look that seemed, almost, to want to know. So, Anne told her. She told Marilla about her parents, both teachers. Both had died of fever when Anne was 3 months old. She had never known them. But she had seen, once, a photograph of her mother, kept by a kind neighbor. Her mother had been beautiful, Anne said. Her mother had had a sweet face. Anne liked to imagine, sometimes, that she looked like her mother. But she knew, really, that she did not. She had her father's red hair, and his freckles, and his thin face. She told Marilla about Mrs. Thomas. Mr. Thomas had been a drunken man. He had not been cruel to her, but he had been loud when he was drunk, and Anne had been afraid. She had hidden, sometimes, in a small closet when Mr. Thomas was very drunk. The closet was dark and small and full of old coats. Anne had pretended, in the closet, that she was a great explorer, hidden in a cave on a strange island. She had told herself stories in the closet until Mr. Thomas had fallen asleep. She told Marilla about Mrs. Hammond, about the 3 sets of twins, about the work. She had cooked by the time she was 8. She had washed clothes by the time she was 9. She had nursed sick babies through the night by the time she was 10. She told Marilla about the orphanage, about Sister Mary, about the gray porridge, about the bed she had shared with another little girl who had cried in her sleep. She told all of this in a steady voice, without complaining, without crying, without asking for pity. She told it like a person who had decided, long ago, that her life was what it was, and there was no use being sad about it. Marilla listened. She drove the buggy slowly. She listened. She did not, after Anne was done, say anything for a long time. She kept driving. The fields rolled past. The sky was blue. The sun was warm. Finally, Marilla said, "Anne, I am going to think about this. I am going to talk to Mrs. Spencer, but I want you to know, child, that I am going to think about it. About whether you can stay." Anne's head turned. Her huge eyes searched Marilla's face. "Really?" she whispered. "Really. I am not promising. I am not saying yes, but I am saying that I will think about it." Anne, in spite of herself, gave a small, trembling smile, a flicker of hope, the smallest flame. Marilla saw the flame. She did not, herself, smile. But she felt, in her chest, a softness, like something that had been frozen for many years was beginning to thaw. They reached Mrs. Spencer's farm. Mrs. Spencer was a kind, bustling, plump woman, with a face like a red apple. She came out to meet them, with a small, confused look. "Marilla Cuthbert," she said, "and little Anne. What on earth are you doing here? I thought you had taken Anne home." "Mrs. Spencer," said Marilla in her firm voice, "there has been a mistake. I asked your sister, when she went to the orphanage, to bring back a boy, about 10 or 11 years old. A boy, not a girl. Anne was sent to us instead." Mrs. Spencer's mouth fell open. She put both her hands on her cheeks. "A boy!" she cried. "Land of love. I thought you said a girl. I would have sworn it was a girl. Robbie Spencer, my husband, said it was a boy. But I told him, no, it is a girl. Oh dear, what a dreadful mix-up." "Yes," said Marilla. "It has been a difficult morning. What are we going to do?" said Mrs. Spencer. "Oh dear. The orphanage will not be able to send a boy on such short notice. But Mrs. Blewett, just up the road, was telling me only yesterday that she wished she had a little girl to help her with the housework and the younger children. She has 8 children, The poor woman is run off her feet. She would be so glad to take Anne." Marilla had heard of Mrs. Blewett. Mrs. Blewett was not, by Marilla's quiet judgment, a kind woman. Mrs. Blewett worked her servants very hard. Mrs. Blewett had a sharp tongue and a quick temper and a thin smile. Marilla pictured, for one moment, Anne in Mrs. Blewett's house, cooking, washing, running after children, being scolded, being too tired to imagine anything. She felt, again, that strange twist in her chest. She glanced at Anne. Anne was standing very still beside her. Her face was pale. Her hands were clenched in her dress. She had heard. She knew then what Mrs. Blewett would be like. She knew that, if Mrs. Spencer's plan went forward, she would be living in Mrs. Blewett's house by tomorrow. She knew that her one beautiful night at Green Gables was all she would ever have of Green Gables. She did not say anything. She just stood there. But Marilla saw her face, and Marilla, in that moment, made a decision. It was perhaps the most important decision Marilla Cuthbert had ever made in her 60 years of life. "Mrs. Spencer," she said. Her voice was clear. "I have decided. Anne will stay with us at Green Gables. Matthew and I will keep her. We will not give her to Mrs. Blewett. We will not send her back to the orphanage. She will stay." Mrs. Spencer's mouth fell open again. "Marilla, are you sure? She is a girl. You wanted a boy." "I know what we wanted, Mrs. Spencer. I have changed my mind. But the work. The boy was supposed to help with the work. I will manage. Matthew will manage. We do not need a boy that badly. We do, however, need—" Marilla paused. She looked at Anne. Anne was looking up at her with wide, unbelieving eyes. "We do, however, need her," Marilla finished, quietly. Anne let out a sound. It was not a word. It was a small, soft, breaking sound, like a sob. She did not move. She just stood there, with those huge eyes. Marilla, in her firm Marilla way, did not embrace her. She did not even touch her. But she turned to her. She said, "Come along, Anne, we're going home." Home. The word landed in Anne's chest, like a great bird, coming to rest on a tree branch after a very long flight. Home. Anne, very small, very thin, very freckled, walked slowly to the buggy. She climbed in. She did not say a word. She could not say a word. She had used up all her words, just hearing the one word that mattered. Home. Marilla climbed in beside her. She picked up the reins. She clucked her tongue. The horse started to walk. They began the long drive back to Green Gables. For a long time, Anne did not speak. She just sat, with her hands in her lap, with her eyes very wide. Then, after they had been driving for nearly an hour, Anne said, very softly, "Marilla, may I really call you Marilla?" Marilla, who had been thinking about the soup she would make for supper, looked at her. "What else would you call me?" "I do not know. Aunt Marilla, perhaps?" "Aunt would be lovely. I have never had an aunt." Marilla thought about it. "I am not your aunt, Anne. We are not related." "No, ma'am. You may call me Marilla. That is what everyone calls me." "Just Marilla? Without anything in front of it?" "Yes." Anne sat very still. Then she said, "Marilla." She said it slowly, tasting the word, like a candy she had never had before. "Marilla." She looked up at the woman beside her, the thin, sharp, gray-haired woman who had decided, against all sense and all plans, to keep her. "Marilla," Anne said, for the third time, "I am very, very glad I am going to live with you and Matthew forever and ever." Marilla did not look at her. She kept her eyes on the road. But her mouth, hidden under the brim of her bonnet, made a small, soft shape. It was almost a smile, the first smile, perhaps, that Marilla had smiled in many years. So Anne came to live at Green Gables. She had been there only one night, but she was, from that day, the daughter of the house. Even though it had been a mistake, even though Marilla had wanted a boy, even though Matthew was 60 years old and his sister was nearly the same, they were her family now. The strangest little family on Prince Edward Island. A shy old man a sharp old woman. A small, thin, freckled girl who talked too much and imagined too much. But they were a family. And, in the weeks and months that followed, they became more of one. More and more and more. Marilla started by buying Anne some new dresses. 3 of them. They were plain dresses. They were practical dresses. Marilla, who was not a woman who believed in finery, made them out of strong, simple cloth. There were no ruffles. There were no puffed sleeves. There were no ribbons. Anne, when she saw the dresses, was very polite. "Thank you, Marilla," she said. "They are very nice dresses." But Anne, in her secret heart, dreamed of puffed sleeves. Anne had seen in the village the little girls who wore puffed sleeves, big, beautiful, balloon-like sleeves. The sleeves were the fashion. Every girl wanted them. Every girl had them. Except for Anne. Marilla thought puffed sleeves were ridiculous. She thought they wasted cloth. She thought they made girls look silly. She made Anne's dresses without any puff in the sleeves at all. Anne did not say anything, but Matthew, who was not very good at noticing most things, somehow noticed this. Matthew, who had been watching Anne, who had been quietly loving Anne since the very first afternoon when she had named the avenue, saw that she wanted puffed sleeves. He did not say anything to Marilla. He just decided in his shy, quiet heart that he would somehow get Anne a dress with puffed sleeves one day, somehow. He did not know how. But he would. Anne started school. The school was a small, white, one-room schoolhouse, about a mile from Green Gables. The teacher was a woman named Miss Stacy. There were 20 children, of all ages, from 5 to 15. On Anne's first day, Marilla braided her hair into 2 tight braids. She gave Anne a small lunch in a tin pail. She gave her a small slate to write on. Anne walked to school with a beating heart. She had never been to a real school. She had been to a few classes at the orphanage, but she had never sat in a room with 20 children who all knew each other and who would all look at her as the new girl. She was very nervous. She walked up the small dirt road to the schoolhouse. She walked through the door. The teacher, Miss Stacy, gave her a kind smile. "You must be Anne," said Miss Stacy. "Come in, come in. The children will be glad to meet you." The children, all 20 of them, turned around and looked at Anne. Anne, who was usually full of words, had no words at all. She just stood there. Her thin face turned bright red. Her 2 red braids hung down. Her freckles showed. 20 pairs of eyes looked at her. Anne wanted, very badly, to run, but she did not run. She walked, slowly, to the small empty seat that Miss Stacy pointed to. She sat down. She kept her eyes on the floor. The girl who was sitting at the desk next to Anne's leaned over. "Hello," she whispered. "I am Diana Barry." Anne looked up. Diana Barry was a beautiful girl. She had dark, dark hair, almost black. She had pink cheeks. She had bright black eyes. She was wearing a beautiful dress with, oh, joy, puffed sleeves, pink puffed sleeves. She was smiling at Anne. She was smiling as if she meant it. She was smiling as if she wanted to be Anne's friend. Anne, in spite of all her shyness, smiled back. "I am Anne," Anne whispered. "Anne with an E." "Anne with an E?" said Diana. "Yes, with an E. It is so much nicer." Diana thought about this. She nodded. "It is nicer," she said. "I shall always call you Anne with an E in my mind, even if I write it just plain Anne." Anne felt, in her thin chest, the warm bird of friendship lift its wings. Diana Barry, of the dark hair and the pink dress and the puffed sleeves, was going to be her friend. Diana lived only half a mile from Green Gables. Diana was 11, just a year younger than Anne. Diana was, Anne soon learned, in the same Sunday school class. Diana had a younger sister named Minnie May. Diana's mother was Mrs. Barry, who lived in a fine white house called Orchard Slope. That afternoon, after school, Diana invited Anne to come home with her. "You must meet Mother," said Diana. "I want her to see you." Anne went. She walked. with Diana, the half-mile to Orchard Slope. They held hands as they walked. Anne had not, in her life, held the hand of another little girl. It was the loveliest thing. When they arrived at Orchard Slope, Diana led Anne into a sunny sitting room. Mrs. Barry was there. She was a kind-looking woman with the same dark hair as Diana and the same pink cheeks. "Mother," said Diana, "this is Anne Shirley, from Green Gables. She is going to be my friend." Mrs. Barry smiled. "Well then," said Mrs. Barry, "it is very nice to meet you, Anne. Sit down. I will get you both a piece of cake." Anne sat down. She did not know, at that moment, that this was one of the most important moments of her whole life. She did not know that Diana Barry would be her friend for the rest of their lives, through school, through troubles, through marriage, through old age, through everything. She did not know that Diana would stand by her when other people did not, that Diana would laugh at her jokes when nobody else got them, that Diana would understand her in a way that very few people would, until Anne was a grown woman. She did not know any of this yet. She just knew that she was sitting in a sunny room with a kind woman and a beautiful new friend, eating a piece of cake. Anne thought, sitting there, "I am so happy. I am so happy that I might burst. Last week I was at the orphanage, and now I am at Orchard Slope, eating cake with Diana Barry." Marilla was right. Life is sometimes very strange, but it can be so very, very good. That night, when Anne walked home from Orchard Slope, the sun was setting. The sky was pink and gold. The fields were soft and green. The road home was the long road, lined with apple trees. The white way of delight. Anne walked under the trees. She walked slowly. She did not want the day to end. The light came down through the branches. The wind moved the leaves very softly. The world smelled of evening, and grass, and apples. Anne sang very softly as she walked. She did not know any real songs, but she sang anyway. A small, wordless song that came out of her like a bird's song. When she got back to Green Gables, Marilla was waiting at the door. "There you are," said Marilla. "Where have you been? I was getting worried." "I was at Orchard Slope, Marilla, with Diana Barry. She is my best friend now. She is going to be my best friend forever." Mrs. Barry gave me cake with raspberry jam on top, and Diana showed me her room. She has a little box where she keeps her treasures. She showed me her treasures. There was a piece of blue ribbon and a small pink shell and a button shaped like a cat. Mrs. Barry said I could come back to visit. Diana said we would be friends till we die. Marilla, is it not the most wonderful thing? I have a bosom friend. A bosom friend, Marilla. I never thought I would have one. Marilla listened. She did not interrupt. She watched Anne's thin, freckled face, glowing with joy. She thought, I have done a good thing. I have done a very good thing, keeping this child. I do not know what is going to happen. I do not know if she will be a good girl. I do not know if she will be a help on the farm. I do not know any of those things. But I have done a good thing. And, watching Anne, Marilla felt, again, that strange feeling in her chest, the thawing, the slow, gentle warming, the melting of something that had been hard for a very long time. She turned briskly to hide her face from Anne. "Come along, child," she said. "Wash your hands. Supper is on the table." Anne came in. She washed her hands. She sat down at the table. Matthew was already there. He gave her a small, shy smile. He passed her the bread. Anne sat between them. The shy old man, the sharp old woman. She ate her supper. She talked, in her quick, happy way, about Diana, about the cake, about the treasures, about the puffed sleeves. Matthew listened. Marilla listened. The kitchen was warm. The lamp was lit. The window showed, outside, the first stars of the evening. A family was, very slowly, being made, in a kitchen, in a small white house, on a small green island. In the very middle of an ordinary summer evening, the family of three, the luckiest little family in the world. The first summer at Green Gables passed like a long, slow, beautiful dream. Anne grew brown in the sun. She helped Marilla in the kitchen. She helped Matthew in the barn. She walked every day with Diana in the woods and in the orchards and along the small streams that ran through Avonlea. Anne named everything. She named the small pool by the bridge the Dryad's Bubble because she said a dryad, a kind of tree spirit, from the old Greek stories surely came there at night to drink. She named the small wood behind Green Gables the Haunted Wood. She did not really think it was haunted, but it would be more interesting if it was. She and Diana, walking through the haunted wood, would frighten themselves with stories of ghosts and white ladies until they could hardly walk home through the dark. They loved it. Anne and Diana made a promise. They made it under a wild plum tree on a warm afternoon in June. They promised to be bosom friends forever and ever, and to be true to each other no matter what. Anne, who had read about such things in books, said it had to be done properly. She said they had to cut their fingers, just a little, and let a drop of blood from each fall onto a leaf, as a sacred vow. Diana, who was not at all the kind of girl who would normally cut her finger, said she thought it was a little silly, but she would do it for Anne. So they did. They cut their fingers, just the tiniest cut, 2 tiny red drops of blood. They mixed them on a green leaf. They held the leaf together with their thumbs. I solemnly swear to be faithful to my bosom friend Diana Barry, as long as the sun and moon shall endure, said Anne in her most dramatic voice. I solemnly swear to be faithful to my bosom friend Anne Shirley, as long as the sun and moon shall endure, said Diana. Then they kissed each other on the cheek. It was, Anne said, the most beautiful moment of her whole life. The next day, Anne told Marilla all about it. Marilla shook her head. You are a queer child, Anne, she said. What an idea! Cutting your fingers. You might have caught an infection. But Marilla, said Anne, the ceremony was very beautiful. You do not understand because you have not read about bosom friendship in books. That is true, said Marilla. I have not. But Marilla, secretly, was glad that Anne had a friend. Marilla had been worried, when Anne had first come, that the other children might be cruel to her. Anne was not, after all, exactly an ordinary child. Anne talked too much. Anne dreamed too much. Anne wore plain dresses. Anne was the only girl with red hair in the whole school. Marilla had been afraid that Anne would be lonely, but Anne was not lonely. Anne had Diana. Diana was a serious girl, a kind girl, a girl whose family was respected in Avonlea. Diana would, Marilla thought, be a good influence on Anne. What Marilla did not yet know was that Anne was, perhaps, an even better influence on Diana. That Diana, who had been a quiet child before Anne came, was now laughing more, and imagining more, and living more. The two of them were good for each other. They were exactly what each had needed. Now, my dear listener, I want to tell you something about Anne. Anne was a good child. She was a loving child. She was a thoughtful child. But Anne had a temper. Anne had a temper, especially about her hair. Anne hated her hair. She hated her red hair more than anything in the world. She would have rather been bald than have red hair. She would have rather had any other color, brown, black, blonde, even gray, any color but red. Whenever anyone mentioned her hair, Anne would instantly become angry. And there was a boy at school who knew this. His name was Gilbert Blythe. Gilbert was a tall, handsome boy with curly brown hair and laughing brown eyes. He was the smartest boy in the school. He was, the other girls said, in love with at least 3 of the older girls. He was popular. He was good at everything. He had been away at the start of the school year. His father had been ill, so Gilbert had been at home, helping his mother. He came back in November. The first day Gilbert was back, he sat behind Anne in school. Anne did not know him. Diana had told her about him, but Anne had never seen him. Gilbert, sitting behind her, looked at the back of Anne's head. He looked at her two long red braids. He had heard about her. He had heard about the strange new girl at Green Gables, with the red hair and the wild imagination. He wanted to make her notice him. He reached out his hand. He took one of Anne's red braids in his fingers. He gave it a small, sharp pull. "Carrots," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "Carrots." Anne went very still. For one moment, she did not move. Then she turned around in her seat. She stood up. Her gray-green eyes were blazing. Her thin face was white. She picked up her slate from the desk. She raised it, high, and she brought it down, hard, on Gilbert Blythe's head. Crack! The slate broke in two. The whole school went silent. Miss Stacy looked up from her desk. Gilbert Blythe sat there, with the broken slate around him, blinking. His head hurt, but he was not really hurt. "Anne Shirley!" Miss Stacy cried. "What are you doing?" Anne stood, with the broken slate handle still in her hand. She was shaking with rage. "He called me carrots," she shouted. "He pulled my hair. He called me carrots." She burst into tears. Miss Stacy, who was a kind teacher, did not punish Anne too harshly. She made Anne stand at the front of the room for a half hour as a punishment. But she did not yell at her. She did not send her home. Anne stood at the front of the room. She would not look at Gilbert. She would not look at anyone. But the damage was done. Gilbert Blythe tried at recess to say he was sorry. "I was only joking, Anne," he said. "I really thought your hair was pretty. I am sorry. Please, do not be angry." Anne, with her chin up, walked past him as if he was not there. She would not speak to him. Not that day. Not the next day. Not the next. She decided, in the proud Anne way, that she would never speak to Gilbert Blythe again. Not as long as she lived. He had called her carrots. That was an unforgivable insult. She did not speak to him for 5 years. 5 years. That, my friend, is how stubborn Anne could be, and how proud, and how easily hurt. But Anne had bigger troubles that year than Gilbert Blythe. One Sunday afternoon, in the middle of summer, Diana came over to Green Gables for tea. Marilla was going out to visit a neighbor. She told Anne that she could give Diana tea by herself in the parlor. "You may use the second best teacups," said Marilla, "and you may open the small jar of raspberry preserves I have in the cupboard. But Anne, be careful. Do not break anything. Do not spill anything. Be a good hostess." "Oh, I will, Marilla. I will be a perfect hostess. I have read about how to be a hostess in books." Marilla looked at her. That may not be enough. But she went. Anne dressed herself in her best plain dress. She made the tea. She put it carefully in the second best teapot. She set out the second best teacups. She put out the raspberry preserves in a small glass dish. She put out a plate of cookies that Marilla had baked the day before. Diana arrived. The two girls sat at the parlor table. They had tea. They were having the most lovely time. Diana, halfway through her tea, said, "Anne, this raspberry cordial is delicious. I do not think I have ever tasted such good cordial." Anne, surprised, said, "Cordial? But Diana, this is tea. The cordial is the red drink. Marilla has a bottle of it on the top shelf in the cellar. She let me give some to you with the tea." Diana said, "Well, I tasted the red drink. It tasted very nice. I had 2 glasses of it. But Anne, it does not taste like cordial at all. It tastes very strong." Anne stared at her. A terrible suspicion was forming in her mind. She ran to the cellar. She climbed up on a chair. She looked at the top shelf. There were 2 bottles there. One was the raspberry cordial. The other, Anne realized, with a dreadful sinking heart, was Marilla's homemade currant wine. Marilla kept it for medicine only. She kept it on the same shelf as the cordial. Anne had taken down the wrong bottle. She had given Diana wine. Diana had drunk 2 big glasses of wine. Anne ran back upstairs. Diana was sitting at the table. Her cheeks were very pink. Her eyes were a little glassy. She was smiling in a strange, sleepy way. "Anne," said Diana in a slow voice, "I think I had better go home. I do not feel very well." She stood up. She wobbled. She nearly fell. Anne grabbed her arm. "Oh, Diana, Diana, I am so sorry. I gave you wine by mistake." "It was the wine, Diana, not the cordial." "Oh dear," said Diana slowly. "I think I had better go home." Anne walked Diana home. She held Diana's arm the whole way. Diana wobbled. She giggled. She said strange things. She tripped over a stone. When they reached Diana's house, Mrs. Barry came out. Mrs. Barry took one look at Diana. She took one look at Anne. She knew at once what had happened. "Anne Shirley," Mrs. Barry shouted. "What have you done to my daughter?" "It was a mistake, Mrs. Barry. I thought it was the cordial. It was the wine. I am so sorry." "You wicked, wicked girl. You have given my daughter wine. You will never set foot in this house again. Diana, come inside." "Anne, go home, and do not ever speak to my daughter again, ever." Mrs. Barry pulled Diana into the house. She slammed the door. Anne stood in the front yard of Orchard Slope, all alone. She started to cry. She cried so hard she could not breathe. She walked home all the way with the tears running down her face. Marilla was there when she arrived. Anne, sobbing, told her everything. The wrong bottle, the wine, Mrs. Barry, the door slamming, the terrible, terrible words. "You will never set foot in this house again." Marilla listened. When Anne was done, Marilla, who was a strict woman but a fair one, said, "Anne, it was a mistake. It was an honest mistake. Mrs. Barry will see in time that you did not mean any harm. I will go and talk to her tomorrow. I will explain." "But Marilla," she said, "I could never speak to Diana again. Forever. And Diana is my bosom friend. Forever and ever. I cannot live without Diana, Marilla. I just cannot." Anne sobbed and sobbed. Marilla sat with her. She did not at first know what to do. Then she did the thing she had never done before. In all the months Anne had been at Green Gables, she put her arms around Anne. She held her. Anne cried into Marilla's shoulder. Anne cried for a long time. Marilla, holding her, felt her thin shoulders shake, felt the tears soak into her own dress. Marilla did not cry. But she felt, again, that strange new feeling, stronger this time, love. Marilla Cuthbert, 61 years old, the strictest woman in Avonlea, the woman who had never had a child of her own, loved this thin, freckled, crying girl. She loved her. She did not say it. She did not have the words, but she held her tighter, and she stroked her red hair, and she said, "There, there, child. There, there. We will figure something out." Marilla went to see Mrs. Barry the next day. She apologized for Anne, she explained. But Mrs. Barry was a proud woman. She did not forgive easily. "Diana will not be friends with Anne anymore," said Mrs. Barry, "and that is final." Marilla came home. She told Anne. Anne did not eat any supper. Anne went up to her small bedroom and shut the door and lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling. The Snow Queen outside her window was bare now. It was autumn. The white blossoms were long gone. Anne thought, "I will never have another bosom friend. Diana was my only one. I will never have another as long as I live. The world is a cruel place. I shall never be happy again." Then she fell asleep, and the next morning she got up and got dressed and went to school. And oh, my friend, there was Diana in her usual seat. Diana could not speak to Anne. Her mother had forbidden it, but Diana looked at Anne with her dark eyes, with a look that said, "I have not forgotten you. We are still bosom friends. We always will be." Anne and Diana wrote letters in secret. They left them, folded small, under a stone by the school fence. They wrote about everything. They could not be together, but they could write. And Anne, slowly, learned that friendship can survive almost anything, even closed doors, even angry mothers, even forbidden afternoons. True friendship is patient. True friendship waits. Diana waited. Anne waited. And, in time, The friendship would be restored. But not yet. Not for a few months. For now, Anne had to be brave. She had to grow up, just a little. She had to learn, the hard way, that the world does not always give us what we want, when we want it. But the world does, sometimes, give us second chances. The second chance came in the winter. It came in the middle of a long, cold January. Diana's little sister, Minnie May, was 3 years old. Minnie May was a sweet, plump little girl with dark curls and pink cheeks. One cold night, Minnie May became very sick. She had what was called the croup. It is a sickness where a small child cannot breathe properly. Their throat closes up. They make a terrible coughing sound. They struggle for air. It was a dangerous sickness. Children, sometimes, died of it. Mrs. Barry was away that night. She had gone to visit a friend in Charlottetown, 3 hours away. Mr. Barry was away too. He was working in town. Diana was alone in the house with Minnie May. There was an old hired man on the farm, but he was deaf, and he was asleep, and he could not be wakened. Diana, in a panic, ran through the cold, dark snow to Green Gables. She knocked on the door. Anne opened it. Diana, gasping for breath, with snow in her hair, said, Anne, please come. Minnie May has the croup. She is dying. Mother is away. I do not know what to do. Please come." Anne did not waste a second. She grabbed her coat, she grabbed her hat. She grabbed something else, too, a small bottle of ipecac that Marilla kept in the kitchen for emergencies. Anne remembered, suddenly, that Mrs. Hammond's twins had had the croup once. Anne, who had helped to nurse them, knew what to do. She had not, then, understood why, but she knew. She and Diana ran, through the snow, all the way to Orchard Slope. When they arrived, Minnie May was lying on the bed, gasping. Anne took charge. She told Diana to bring hot water, to put it in a kettle, to bring towels, to bring blankets. Anne gave Minnie May a small dose of the ipecac. She made the little girl drink it, even though Minnie May did not want to. Anne held Minnie May over the steam from the hot water to loosen her throat. She wrapped her in warm blankets. She held her all night on her lap by the fire. She talked to her softly. She sang to her. She rocked her. Hour after hour, through the long dark night, Anne nursed Minnie May. She did not sleep. She did not stop. By morning, Minnie May was breathing easily. Minnie May was sleeping peacefully in Anne's arms. The danger had passed. Anne had saved her life. When Mr. and Mrs. Barry came home that morning, they found Anne sitting in the rocking chair by the fire. Minnie May was asleep on her lap. Diana was asleep on the rug at her feet. Mrs. Barry took one look. She understood at once what had happened. She walked over to Anne. She knelt down beside the rocking chair. She put her hand on Anne's thin, freckled cheek. "Anne, Mrs. Barry whispered, "you saved my baby's life. You saved her. Oh, Anne, I am so sorry. I am so very sorry about the wine, about forbidding Diana to be your friend, about all of it. I have been a foolish woman. Will you forgive me?" Anne, with tears in her eyes, nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Barry. Of course I forgive you. Can you ever come back to Orchard Slope, Anne? Can you and Diana be friends again?" "Oh, Mrs. Barry, yes. Oh, yes." Diana, on the rug, woke up. She heard her mother's words. She sat up, slowly, blinking. She looked at Anne. Anne looked at her. Without a word, the two of them got up. They walked, slowly, around the rocking chair, with the still sleeping Minnie May between them. They wrapped their arms around each other. They held each other for a long, long time. When Anne walked home that morning, the sun was rising. The snow was bright. The world was new. She had her bosom friend back. She had saved a small life. She had, for the first time in her own life, been a true help to someone. Anne, walking home, felt very tall, and very brave, and very full of joy. She walked into Green Gables. Marilla was there, in the kitchen. Marilla, who had been worried all night, who had been pacing, who had not been able to sleep, looked up when Anne came in. "Anne," she said, "where have you been? I have been so worried. Diana came and got you in the middle of the night, and I never heard you go. Are you all right?" Anne walked over to Marilla. She put her arms around her. She hugged her. It was the first time Anne had hugged Marilla. Marilla, taken by surprise, did not know, at first, what to do. Then she hugged Anne back. She held her thin, freckled girl in her thin, tired arms in the warm kitchen of Green Gables in the early morning light. She thought, "I have a daughter. This child, who came to me by mistake, is my daughter. She is mine, and I am hers. And I would not trade her for any boy in the whole world." But this story, my friend, is not finished yet. Anne grew and grew and grew. She grew taller. She grew thinner. She grew, slowly, more beautiful. Her freckles faded just a little. Her thin face filled out. Her hair, which she had hated all her life, slowly darkened from carrot red into a deep, rich auburn. By the time she was 15, her hair was, perhaps, the most beautiful thing about her. Though Anne, with her old sad memory of being called carrots, still did not believe it. Anne grew in other ways too. She grew in her schoolwork. Anne, who had been so behind in her lessons when she first came to Green Gables, was now, by the time she was 13, at the top of her class. She was a brilliant student. She loved school. She loved books. She loved learning. Her hardest competition was Gilbert Blythe, the same Gilbert Blythe who had pulled her braid and called her carrots all those years ago. The same Gilbert Blythe she had refused to speak to for 5 years. Anne and Gilbert competed in everything: in spelling, in arithmetic, in history, in writing. They were the two smartest students Miss Stacy had ever taught. Sometimes Anne was first, sometimes Gilbert was first. But, no matter what, Anne would not speak to him. Diana told Anne that this was very silly. Marilla told Anne that this was very stubborn. Even Matthew, who almost never gave advice, told Anne in his shy way that he thought she might forgive Gilbert. Just a little. After all this time. But Anne, with her chin up, would not. She had said she would not speak to Gilbert Blythe ever again. When she was 11, she was going to keep her word, even though in her secret heart she had stopped being angry at him long ago. Even though in her secret heart she sometimes wondered if she had not been a bit silly. She would not back down. Anne was, my friend, very, very stubborn. You may know someone like this. You may, perhaps, be someone like this. We all have a little of Anne in us. We all have things we said when we were young and hurt that we should have let go of, but we did not. We carry these things. They get heavier year by year. We do not usually see how heavy they are. We only see how, with each year, our shoulders ache a little more. But Anne would, eventually, let her grudge go. She would, eventually, speak to Gilbert again. You will see how it happens. But not yet. For now, let me tell you about another thing that happened to Anne when she was 13. Let me tell you about the green hair. It happened on a rainy Saturday in spring. Anne was alone in the house. Marilla had gone to visit a sick neighbor. Matthew was working in the far field. Anne was 13 years old. She was at that age when a girl starts to think very much about how she looks. She is not a child anymore. She is not a woman yet. She is in the strange in-between place where every freckle, every wisp of hair, every line of her face seems to matter very much. Anne had been thinking all morning about her red hair. She hated it more than ever. She hated it because it was, she felt, the only thing wrong with her. She had grown. She had filled out. She thought, perhaps, that she might one day be pretty, if only it were not for her hair. Her hair was, she had decided, the curse of her life. That morning, a peddler came to the door. A peddler was a man who traveled from house to house, selling small things: soaps, hairpins, ribbons, pots and pans. bottles of mysterious tonics. Anne, who was alone, should not have opened the door, but she did. The peddler was a thin, smiling man with a kind face. He had a brown wooden case full of small bottles and packets. He asked Anne if she or her mother needed anything. Anne said no. The peddler was about to leave. Then he looked at Anne. He looked at her hair. "Miss," he said in a thoughtful voice, "pardon me, but if I may say so, you have very beautiful hair." Anne's mouth fell open. "Beautiful?" she whispered. "Beautiful," he said. "It is, however, an unusual color. You may have wished sometimes that it was a different color, yes?" Anne nodded. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. The peddler smiled. He opened his case. He took out a small black bottle. "I have here," he said, "a special preparation from Germany. It is a hair dye. It dyes hair the most beautiful, deep, raven black. It is very expensive. It costs 75 cents, but it would, if used on hair like yours, transform you. Truly, miss, it would transform you." Anne stared at the bottle. She had 75 cents. Marilla had given her 75 cents the week before as a small reward for good schoolwork. Anne had been saving it. Anne, looking at the black bottle, thought, "I could have black hair, like Diana's, like the heroines in my books, like the girls who get to be beautiful. I could not be Carrots anymore. I could be anyone." She bought the bottle. The peddler smiled, took her money, and left. Anne, with the bottle in her hand, went up to her small bedroom. She read the small label. The label said to mix the dye with water in a bowl, to apply it to the hair, to leave it on for 1 hour, to rinse it out. Anne mixed the dye with water. The mixture was very dark, black. She held her head over a basin. She poured the dark mixture over her hair. She rubbed it in, all the way, every strand, her whole head. The dye smelled strange, sharp, sour, but Anne, full of hope, did not mind. She sat for an hour with the dye in her hair, dreaming of how she would look. She imagined the looks on people's faces. Marilla, surprised. Matthew, amazed. Diana, jealous. Gilbert Blythe, well, never mind Gilbert Blythe. She imagined herself, with sleek black hair, walking into school, with her chin up, a beautiful, mysterious, raven-haired girl. When the hour was up, she went to the basin. She rinsed her hair again and again. Then she went to the small mirror on her wall. She looked. Her mouth dropped open. Her hair was not black. Her hair was green. A bright, vivid, terrible green. The kind of green you see on a pond in summer when the algae grows. The kind of green that should not be on anyone's head, ever. Anne stared at her green hair in the mirror. She made a small sound, like a small dying creature. She washed her hair, again, with soap, with more water, with more soap. The green did not come out. She washed it with vinegar, with baking soda, with everything she could find in the kitchen. The green did not come out. She sat down on her bed. She held her green head in her hands. She cried, the worst tears of her whole life. She cried for 2 hours. She was crying when Marilla came home. Marilla came up the stairs. Marilla knocked on Anne's bedroom door. Marilla opened it. Marilla saw Anne on the bed with green hair. Marilla, for one long moment, could not speak. Then she said in a strange voice, "Anne, what have you done?" Anne, with great green tears running down her freckled cheeks, told her. The peddler, the bottle, the dye, the hope of being beautiful. Marilla listened. When Anne was done, Marilla, who was a strict woman, but who knew that sometimes a child does not need more scolding, sat down on the bed beside her. She put her arm around Anne's shoulders. "Oh, Anne," Marilla said. "Oh, my child." That was all she said. Anne, in spite of her tears, in spite of her green hair, felt a tiny bit of comfort. "Marilla," Anne sobbed, "what am I going to do? I cannot go out of the house. I cannot ever go out of the house again. I will have to stay in my room forever. I will never go to school. I will never see Diana again. I will die here, with my green hair, an old green-haired woman, all alone. Marilla, in spite of everything, smiled a tiny bit. Anne, she said, I think the only thing to do is to cut it off. Anne stared at her. Cut it off? All of it. Short, very short. There is no other way. The dye will not wash out. We will cut your hair, very short, and it will grow back. In time, it will be your normal color again. Until then, you will look like a boy, but it cannot be helped. Anne thought. She thought about her hair, which she had hated. She thought about her hair being cut off, gone, bald, almost. It seemed, for a moment, the worst thing in the world. But then she thought, it will grow back. It will grow back, the way it was. My red hair, my hair that I have hated all my life. And, for the first time, Anne realized something. She realized that, terrible as her red hair was, it was hers. It was part of her. And now, when she was about to lose it, she felt, suddenly, that she would miss it. She would miss her own red hair. She nodded. Yes, Marilla, cut it off, please. Marilla got out the scissors. She cut, very carefully, all of Anne's hair off. Short, very short, like a boy's. When she was done, the floor of the small bedroom was covered with green hair. And Anne, with her short red and green stubble, looked at herself in the mirror. She looked, she thought, like a small, mournful boy. But she had learned, perhaps, the most important lesson of her young life. She had learned that vanity is a foolish thing. She had learned that no matter how much we hate parts of ourselves, those parts are still ours, and we should not throw them away in anger. She had learned that, sometimes, the things we have are better than we know. She would not, after that day, ever again ask to be someone else. She would, slowly, come to like her red hair. She would, in time, even come to be a little proud of it. It was hers, and what is yours is precious, even if it is not what you wanted, even if it is not, at all, what you imagined. It is still yours. The hair grew back, slowly, slowly, through the spring, through the summer, through the autumn. Anne wore a small bonnet to school for many months. She did not take it off. The children who had laughed at her at first eventually got used to it. Diana, of course, did not laugh. Diana, the bosom friend, never laughed at Anne in all the years they were friends. By the next year, Anne's hair was back, red, bright, carroty, and Anne, who had hated it before, smiled, very small, every time she brushed it. It was hers. She would not lose it again. The years went by. Anne grew up. She was 14, then 15, then 16. She had grown tall. She was now as tall as Marilla. She was thin, but she was strong. Her freckles had faded almost entirely. Her face had filled out into something almost beautiful. A thin face, yes, but with high cheekbones, and a sweet mouth, and great gray-green eyes that seemed always to be full of light. Her hair was a deep, rich auburn now. The reddest red had darkened into a warm chestnut. It was thick. It fell in waves down her back when it was not braided. Anne, although she did not believe it, was a lovely girl. Diana said so. Marilla said so. Even Matthew, who almost never said anything about anyone's appearance, said so. You look real fine, Anne, Matthew said one evening, watching her in her new dress. Anne smiled at him. She did not believe she was lovely, but she loved that Matthew thought so. When Anne was 15, the great new teacher came to Avonlea. Miss Stacy had left. Miss Stacy had moved to another town. Anne had cried for a week. She had loved Miss Stacy. The new teacher was a young woman named Miss Stewart. Miss Stewart was, the children said, almost as good as Miss Stacy. Miss Stewart noticed something about Anne very quickly. She noticed that Anne was unusually clever. She noticed that Anne was unusually good at writing, at poetry, at memorizing long passages from books. She noticed that Anne had a mind, perhaps, that was meant for something more than the small white schoolhouse in Avonlea. She came one evening to Green Gables to talk to Marilla and Matthew. Anne could go to college, Miss Stewart said. Anne is bright enough. She could go to Queen's Academy in Charlottetown. She could become a teacher. Or after that, she could go to a real university. I have never had a student with as much potential as Anne. Marilla and Matthew listened. After Miss Stewart left, they talked. It would cost money sending Anne to college. It would mean Anne would have to go away to live in Charlottetown, to board with a family. It would mean Green Gables would, for the first time since Anne had come, be quiet again. But Marilla, who had thought about this for many months, said Anne should go. If she can, Anne should have her chance. Matthew, who had thought about it too, said, Anne should go. Anne has a fine mind. It would be a shame to waste it. So Anne began to study. She studied with all her heart. She studied with Gilbert Blythe. Yes, even though she still would not speak to him. Miss Stewart had decided that the brightest students in the school should study extra subjects after school to prepare for the Queen's entrance examination. Anne, Gilbert, and 5 other students. They studied together in the same room. They listened to Miss Stewart's lectures. They worked on the same problems. But Anne and Gilbert never spoke. When they wrote answers on the blackboard, side by side, they did not speak. When they sat at the same long table doing arithmetic, they did not speak. It was, perhaps, the strangest silence in Avonlea. Diana said once, Anne, I do not understand you. Gilbert is surely the nicest boy in the school. He has been nicer to you all these years than you deserve. He has tried again and again to apologize. He looks at you sometimes as if his heart is going to break. Anne, why will you not speak to him? Anne, with her chin up, said, Diana, he called me carrots when I was 11. Yes, Anne, when you were 11. You are 15 now. Are you going to be angry at him your whole life? Anne thought. She did not answer. But, deep inside her, she knew that Diana was right. She knew that her anger at Gilbert was, by now, a thing she carried out of habit, not out of real feeling. She knew that, somewhere in her heart, she had forgiven him years ago. She just did not yet know how to tell him. She did not yet know how to take back 5 years of silence. She would, in time, but not yet. In June, the children took the Queen's entrance examination. It was a long, hard examination, 2 days, many subjects, many essays, many problems. Anne wrote and wrote and wrote. Anne did her very best. She finished on the second day, exhausted. She walked out of the examination hall, and Gilbert Blythe walked out behind her. For one moment, in the doorway, their eyes met. Anne, with her usual proud chin, would not have smiled at him. But she was so tired, and so relieved, and so suddenly, surprisingly, glad to see Gilbert, who had taken the same examination, who had worked just as hard, who had been there with her in the strange way that he had always been there. She smiled, just a little, not a real smile, but a softening around her mouth. Gilbert saw it. His own face brightened. Suddenly, he did not speak. He knew better, but he smiled back, and he tipped his hat to her as he passed. It was, in 5 years, the warmest exchange they had had. It was a beginning, but it was only a beginning. The results of the examination came 3 weeks later in the newspaper. Anne, that morning, did not eat any breakfast. She did not, she said, have any appetite. Diana came running over to Green Gables with the newspaper in her hand. Anne, Diana shouted. Anne, come and see! Come and see! Anne ran out. Diana, with shining eyes, held up the newspaper. You are first, Anne. You are first on the list of 200 students from the whole island. You are number 1. You are first. Anne grabbed the paper. She looked. There was the list. The names of the 200 students who had passed the examination, listed in order from highest score to lowest. At the very top, in bold print, was the name Anne Shirley, and right under it was the name Gilbert Blythe. Anne and Gilbert had tied for first place. 200 students from the whole island of Prince Edward Island had taken the examination. Anne and Gilbert had tied for first. Anne sat down on the porch step. She was holding the newspaper so tightly her knuckles were white. She had done it. She had done it. She had come from an orphanage. She had been, only 5 years ago, a thin, freckled girl with no family, no home, no future. She had been a girl no one wanted. And now she was the top student in Prince Edward Island. She had a family. She had a home. She had a future. She put the paper down. She covered her face with her hands. She did not cry. She just sat, very still. Diana, beside her, put her arm around her shoulders. "Oh, Anne," Diana whispered. "Oh, Anne, I am so proud." Marilla came out then with Matthew, both of them having heard Diana's shouting. When Anne told them, when Marilla saw the paper, when Matthew read the list with his old eyes, neither of them spoke at first. Then Marilla said in a quiet voice, "Well, Anne, well then, you are going to Queen's." Matthew very quietly said, "We always knew you would. Did we not, Marilla?" "Yes, Matthew, we always knew." It was not perhaps the most dramatic celebration in the world. It was a thin, freckled girl no more, sitting on a porch step with a newspaper in her hand. It was an old, quiet man with his hat in his hands, smiling shyly. It was an old, sharp woman with her chin up but her eyes soft. It was a bosom friend holding her hand. It was a small, ordinary porch, a small, ordinary house, a small, ordinary day, and a small, ordinary summer. But it was, for those 5 people, the happiest moment they had ever known. That September, Anne went to Queen's Academy. She went away. For the first time in 5 years, she left Green Gables. She would only be home now on holidays, at Christmas, at Easter, in the summer. Green Gables on the day Anne left was very quiet. Matthew drove her to the train station, the same train station where, 5 years before, he had picked her up by mistake. He had been an old man then. He was an older man now. His hair was whiter. His back was a little more bent. His hand, which had grown to love Anne so much that he could hardly bear to say goodbye, shook a little as he helped her down from the buggy. "Goodbye, Anne," Matthew said. "Goodbye, Matthew." He hugged her, very awkwardly, very shyly. He had not, in his life, hugged anyone except a small newborn lamb once, and Anne, in 5 years, only once or twice. But he hugged her now. Anne hugged him back, very tight. "I will be home for Christmas, Matthew." "I know, Anne. Take care of Marilla." "I will. And the horse, and the cat." "I will, Anne." She got on the train. She waved to him through the window. He stood on the platform. He waved back. The train pulled away. Matthew stood there, after it was gone, for a long time. He stood there with his hat in his hand. He thought, "She is gone. The light of Green Gables is gone. She will come back. She will come back at Christmas. But she will not, ever again, be the small girl I picked up at this station. She is grown now. She is grown. It is perhaps the way of life. The children come. The children grow. The children leave. And the old people, on the platforms, watch them go." He drove home, slowly. When he came into the kitchen, Marilla was at the table. She had been making bread, but she had stopped. Her hands were covered in flour. They were resting on the table. Marilla, who never cried, had tears on her face. She turned to Matthew. "It is so quiet, Matthew," she said. "Aye, Marilla, it is so quiet." He sat down. He took off his hat. They sat together, at the table, the old brother and the old sister. They did not speak for a long time. The kitchen, which had been so full for 5 years, of Anne's voice, of Anne's laughter, of Anne's footsteps, was empty. It was the deepest, loneliest quiet Marilla had ever known. But she did not regret a thing, she thought, looking at the empty kitchen. "I have a daughter. She is at Queen's Academy in Charlottetown tonight. She is unpacking her trunk in a small room in a boarding house. She is meeting her new teachers. She is, perhaps, a little homesick, perhaps a little lonely, but she is mine, and, in a way, I am hers. And that is everything. Anne came home for Christmas. She brought with her a small pile of books, new books, books she had read at Queen's, books she could not stop talking about. She brought, also, news. She had been doing well in her studies. So well that Miss Stewart's prediction about Anne being unusually clever had turned out to be more true than anyone had imagined. She had not, however, been first in her class at Queen's. Gilbert Blythe had been first. Gilbert had gone to Queen's at the same time as Anne. He was studying for his teacher's certificate, the same as Anne. They were in the same classes. Anne, who had been second at the end of the first semester, was determined to be first by the end of the year. She studied like she had never studied before. She wrote to Diana almost every day, long letters about everything she was learning. She wrote to Marilla and Matthew every week, shorter letters, but full of love. The winter passed. The spring came. Anne came home for Easter, for one short, wonderful week. The cherry tree outside her window, the Snow Queen, was just beginning to bud. Then she went back. The final examinations were near. She wrote home that she was studying hard. She wrote that she missed Green Gables. She wrote that, sometimes, she walked to the bridge over the river in Charlottetown, just to stand and breathe the air, and pretend she was back on the small green island of her heart. In June, the examinations came. In June, the results came. Anne wrote home with the news. She had won the Avery Scholarship. The Avery Scholarship was a large amount of money, given each year to the very best student at Queen's. It was enough to pay for 4 years at a real university. Anne could go to Redmond College. She could become not just a teacher, but a writer or a professor, or anything she wanted. The whole island was talking about her. When Anne came home for the summer, the train was met at the station by Diana and Mrs. Barry and several other ladies of Avonlea. But Marilla and Matthew were not there. Matthew, that summer, had not been well. For some months, Matthew had been having trouble with his heart. He would, sometimes, get a sharp pain in his chest. He would have to sit down. He would have to rest for a long time before he could move again. Marilla had been worried. Matthew, in his shy, quiet way, had said it was nothing. He had said he was just getting old. He had said it would pass. It had not passed. The doctor had come. The doctor had said Matthew must not work hard. The doctor had said Matthew must not lift heavy things. The doctor had said Matthew's heart was tired. Matthew, who had worked all his life, did not know how to rest. He worked anyway, a little less, but he worked. When Anne came home, that June, Matthew was not at the station. He was at home, sitting in his chair by the kitchen window. Anne came running in. She had run the whole way from Diana's buggy when she had been driven home. She came into the kitchen. She saw Matthew in his chair. She stopped. He looked smaller, somehow, thinner, grayer, but he smiled. "Anne," he said, "you are home." Anne went to him. She knelt on the floor by his chair. She put her head on his old knees. "Matthew," she whispered, "I am home." He stroked her hair. His hand was thin. His hand was shaking, just a little. But he stroked her hair, gently, the way he had wanted to for 5 years, and had never quite known how. "My girl," he said, "my girl." It was the most words Matthew had ever spoken to Anne at one time. It was enough. Anne, that summer, stayed close to Green Gables. She helped Marilla in the house. She helped Matthew, in small ways, with the garden. She walked, every evening, with Diana, to all the old places. The White Way of Delight, the Dryad's Bubble, the Haunted Wood, the little graveyard at the edge of the village. She talked, sometimes, of Redmond College, of going away in September, of all the things she would learn and do and be. She talked, sometimes, of becoming a writer. She had been writing secretly for some time, small stories, small poems. She thought, perhaps, that one day she would write a real book. Matthew listened. He listened with great pride. He had no doubt at all that Anne would write a real book. He had no doubt that Anne would, one day, do great things. He told her so. "You will do fine things, Anne. You will. I know it. I have known it since the first day." "Since the first day, Matthew?" "Aye, since the white way of delight." Anne smiled. "You remember that, Matthew? You remember the name I gave it?" "I remember everything, Anne. Everything I have known of you. Every word, every minute. I would not trade 1 minute of these last 5 years for anything in this world." Anne, looking at him, felt her eyes fill with tears. She did not then know why. She did not know then that there would not be many more conversations like this. She did not know that, in only a few weeks, she would lose him. She only knew that, sitting in the warm summer kitchen, with Matthew in his chair, with Marilla making bread at the table, with the soft Prince Edward Island sun coming in through the small window, she was as happy as a human being can be. And that was, perhaps, all she needed to know. The morning came. It was a quiet morning. Late June. The light was soft. The birds were singing. The orchard was full of the sweet smell of green apples. Matthew was up early, the way he always was. He went out to the barn. He fed the horse. He came back into the kitchen. He sat down at the table. Marilla was making breakfast. Anne came down. She kissed Matthew on the cheek, as she had been doing every morning since she had come home. She kissed Marilla on the cheek. She sat down to eat. Matthew picked up the morning newspaper that had been left on the table. He read it for a moment, then his face went strange. His hand, holding the newspaper, began to shake. He made a small sound. Then he slumped slowly in his chair. The newspaper fell slowly to the floor. Anne, terrified, jumped up. "Matthew!" she cried. "Matthew!" She ran to him. She took his hand. His hand was cold. His eyes were closed. His chest was not moving. "Marilla!" Anne screamed. "Marilla!" Marilla came running. She took one look. She knew. She had been afraid of this for many months. She had known in some part of her that it was coming, but she had not been ready. You are never ready. Even when you know it is coming, you are never ready. Matthew Cuthbert, who had picked up a small, thin, freckled girl at the train station 5 years before, by mistake, who had loved her with all his shy, quiet heart, who had let her name the avenue, who had bought her a dress with puff sleeves the Christmas before, in secret, with money he had saved from his work, who had said she would do fine things. Matthew Cuthbert was gone. He had gone the way he had lived, quietly, without making a fuss, without saying goodbye. His old kind heart, which had been so tired for so long, had finally stopped. He was 65 years old. He had been Anne's father for 5 years. Anne held his hand. She held it for a long, long time. She did not let go, even when Marilla, with tears running silently down her face, gently tried to lead her away. "Anne, come, child. The doctor is coming. We must let the doctor see him." Anne did not move. She held Matthew's old, cold, kind hand. She pressed it to her cheek. She whispered, "Matthew, Matthew, I love you. I love you. I love you." She had never said it to him. She had not, in 5 years, ever said it out loud. She had thought, always, that there would be more time. There would be tomorrow. There would be next Christmas. There would be next summer. There was none of that now. There was only this morning. This last morning, with Matthew in his chair, holding the newspaper that had fallen, with the sun coming in through the window, with his old hand growing colder in her young hand. She told him she loved him. She hoped he could hear. She hoped, more than anything, that he could hear. Perhaps he could. Some people, my friend, believe that even after the body has stopped, the spirit lingers for a little while. Just long enough to hear the last words, just long enough to take them with it into whatever comes next. I do not know for certain if this is true, but I hope it is. I hope Matthew heard. I hope he carried Anne's words with him. I hope he knew in his last moment that he had been loved. Now, my friend, before I tell you about the last part of the story, let me tell you about one more thing. One more quiet, perfect thing that happened to Anne in those last few months at home before she went away to Queen's Academy. Let me tell you about the night Anne recited a poem at the Great White Sands Hotel. It was a warm evening in August. The White Sands Hotel was a grand summer hotel on the coast of Prince Edward Island, where rich people from the cities came to spend their holidays. The hotel had a great long porch and a great dining room and tall white pillars at the front door. People walked in the evenings on the white sand beach in their fine dresses and their black evening jackets. The hotel was holding a concert that summer, a charity concert. The money would go to help the local hospital. The hotel had asked for the program several of the local children to perform, to recite poems, to play the piano, to sing songs. Anne, who was the best reciter for many miles around, had been asked. Anne, who had never been to such a grand place in her life, was both terrified and delighted. Marilla had made her, in secret, a new dress for the occasion. Marilla, who did not believe in finery, had been saving for months. She had bought a soft, pale green silk. She had sewn the dress, all by herself, in the evenings, after Anne had gone to bed. She had, and this is the great thing, she had made the sleeves with the biggest, fullest, most beautiful puffed sleeves on Prince Edward Island. Marilla had finally given Anne her puffed sleeves. She gave them to her on the evening of the concert. She brought the dress out of her bedroom on a wooden hanger and she held it up. Anne, who had not seen the dress before, gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Marilla," she whispered. "Marilla, Marilla, Marilla." She could not say anything else, just Marilla's name, over and over. Marilla, with a small, dry smile, said, "Well, are you going to put it on? Or are you going to stand there saying my name all evening?" Anne, in a daze, took the dress. She went up to her small bedroom. She put it on. She came down the stairs. Marilla was at the bottom of the stairs. Matthew was in his chair by the window. Diana, who had come over especially, was waiting in the kitchen. When Anne came down, in her pale green dress with the great full puff sleeves, with her auburn hair pinned up in soft waves, with her gray-green eyes shining, the three of them, for one moment, did not speak. She looked, Matthew thought, like a small bride. She looked, Marilla thought, like a young woman, not a girl anymore, a young woman. She looked, Diana thought, like a princess from a book. "Oh, Anne," Diana breathed, "you look so beautiful." Anne, in her new dress, turned around, slowly. "Do I really, Diana? Really, truly? You are the most beautiful girl I have ever seen." Matthew, very softly from his chair, said, You look fine, Anne. You look just fine." Anne walked over to him. She knelt down beside his chair. She put her thin hand on his old knee. "Matthew," she said, "Marilla made the dress. But you, I think, paid for it. Did you not?" Matthew turned pink. "No, Anne, no, never mind that. You did you not? You gave Marilla the money for the silk." Matthew, very embarrassed, said, "Just a little, just to help." Anne kissed his old cheek. "Thank you, Matthew, thank you. I have wanted puffed sleeves all my life, and now, my first pair, they were given to me by you. I will never, ever forget." Matthew, who did not know what to do with this much love at once, just patted her hand. "Run along now, Anne, run along. The Allens are coming to take you. Be a good girl, recite well, make us proud." Anne stood up. She kissed Marilla, too, on the cheek. She and Diana went out to wait for the buggy. When they had gone, and the kitchen was quiet, Marilla sat down at the table. Matthew, in his chair, sat very still. After a long moment, he said, "Marilla, she has grown up, has she not?" "She has, Matthew, she has. It is hard to believe she is the same child who came to us 5 years ago. It is hard. It is good, but it is hard." Marilla looked at her brother. She saw on his old face a kind of bittersweet pride. The look that all parents have when they realize that the child they have loved is, somehow, not a child anymore. "Aye, Matthew, it is hard, but it is good." They sat in the kitchen together while Anne went off in her pale green dress with the puffed sleeves to recite a poem at the Great White Sands Hotel. The hotel was, when Anne arrived, the most magnificent place she had ever seen. There were great gas lamps lighting the long porch. There were tables of food laid out with silver and china. There were ladies in beautiful gowns. There were gentlemen in black evening coats. There was a small orchestra playing soft music in the corner of the dining room. Anne and Diana, holding hands, slipped through the crowd. They had been told to wait in a small side room where the other performers were getting ready. The other performers were a great many people. Most of them were grown-ups. There was a fine soprano from Charlottetown who was to sing. There was a famous elocutionist from Boston who was to recite. There were 2 musicians from Halifax who were going to play a duet. Anne, looking at them all, suddenly felt very small. She had been planning to recite a poem called The Maiden's Vow. It was a very dramatic poem. She had practiced it for weeks. Diana had said she did it beautifully. But now, looking at these grand grown-up performers, Anne felt that she could not possibly recite The Maiden's Vow. It would sound silly, a little country girl reciting a dramatic poem before all these fine people. Her stomach felt cold. Her hands were shaking. She turned to Diana. "Diana," she whispered, "I cannot do it. I cannot recite. I will make a fool of myself. I want to go home." Diana, who was a very practical girl, looked at her. "Anne," she said firmly, "you will do it. You have been practicing for weeks. You will do it beautifully." "But the others, Diana, the others are so grand, so famous. Look at that woman from Boston. She is a real elocutionist. She has been on real stages. I am just a girl from Avonlea." "Then be a girl from Avonlea. Recite as a girl from Avonlea. That is enough." Anne, hearing this, took a deep breath. She closed her eyes. She tried to remember why she loved the poem she had chosen. She tried to remember how it had felt the first time she had read it, in her small bedroom, with the Snow Queen outside her window. She remembered. She opened her eyes. She was still nervous, but she was less afraid. She was perhaps even ready. The concert began. The first performer was the famous elocutionist from Boston. She walked on the small stage in a beautiful red dress, and she recited a long, dramatic poem about a dying queen. Her voice was beautiful. Her gestures were grand. The audience clapped when she was done, very politely. Then the soprano from Charlottetown sang. Then the duet from Halifax. Then a small boy played the violin. Then, finally, it was Anne's turn. Anne walked on her thin legs, in her pale green dress with the puffed sleeves, to the small stage. She stood in front of the audience. She looked out. She saw, in the front row, the famous elocutionist from Boston. The elocutionist was smiling at her, kindly. She saw, in the back of the room, several boys from her school. Gilbert Blythe was there. He was watching her, with a strange, soft look on his face. She did not look at Gilbert for very long. She closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She thought of Matthew in his chair at home, hoping she would do well. She thought of Marilla, who had stayed up nights to make her dress. She thought of Diana, sitting just off the stage, holding her breath. And she began. She recited The Maiden's Vow. She recited it, not as a famous elocutionist would, not with grand gestures, not with a trained voice. She recited it as Anne Shirley, a girl from Avonlea, a girl who had read the poem 100 times in her small bedroom by candlelight. A girl who loved every word. Her voice was clear. Her voice was warm. Her voice carried, somehow, all the way to the back of the dining room. The audience went very still. When Anne came to the most dramatic part of the poem, where the maiden was making her vow, Anne's gray-green eyes filled with real tears. She felt the poem. She lived the poem. The audience could see her, living it. When she came to the end, and she said the last line, very softly, the room was so quiet you could hear the small wind outside, moving in the trees. For one moment, no one moved. Then the audience burst into applause. The clapping went on and on and on. People stood up, they clapped, they cheered. They called out for more. The elocutionist from Boston was the first to stand. The elocutionist had tears in her own eyes. She walked over to Anne. When Anne came off the stage, she took both of Anne's thin hands in her own. "My dear child," the elocutionist said, "you have a gift, a real gift. Promise me you will not waste it. Promise me you will go to a college. You will become a great writer, or a great actress, or both. Promise me." Anne, who could hardly believe what was happening, nodded. "I promise." The elocutionist kissed her cheek. The crowd was still applauding. Anne, dazed, made her way back to Diana. Diana threw her arms around her. Anne, you were wonderful." "You were the best of all of them." "Oh, Anne, everyone is saying so." Anne, in Diana's arms, started, finally, to cry. The tears she had been holding back with the poem came spilling out. She cried with joy. She cried with relief. She cried because, for one moment, in her pale green dress with the puffed sleeves, in front of all those people, she had been exactly what she had always dreamed of being. She had been Anne, the whole of Anne, with her gift and her heart and her voice, shared with a room full of strangers. And the room of strangers had loved her. She had not, in her life, ever been loved by a room full of strangers. It was a strange and beautiful feeling. She would perhaps feel it again many times in the years to come, when she became a teacher, when she became, eventually, a writer, when she had her own children. But that night, in the great dining room of the White Sands Hotel, was the first time. The first time always, my friend, stays with us. The first time you are loved by strangers. The first time you stand on a stage. The first time you give your gift to the world, and the world gives a gift back. You do not ever forget it. Anne came home that night, very late. The buggy dropped her off at the gate of Green Gables. The house was dark. Marilla and Matthew had gone to bed. But there was, in the kitchen window, a single small light, a candle, burning. Marilla, before going to bed, had lit a candle for Anne, so that, when Anne came home, the house would not be dark. Anne walked up the path. She opened the door very quietly. She came into the kitchen. The candle was burning on the table. Beside it, there was a small plate with a slice of pie and a glass of milk. There was a small note written in Marilla's careful hand. "Anne, have a snack. Sleep well. Tell us everything in the morning. Good night, Marilla." Anne sat down at the table. She ate the pie. She drank the milk. She read the note 3 times. She had grown up that night, just a little. She had stood on a stage. She had been loved by strangers. But here, at the kitchen table, by the candlelight, with the pie that Marilla had left for her, she was, still, just Anne. The thin, freckled girl who had come, by mistake, to Green Gables 5 years before. She finished her pie. She blew out the candle. She went upstairs to her small bedroom. The Snow Queen was outside her window, full of summer leaves now, green in the moonlight. She got into her bed. She fell asleep, almost at once. She slept the deep, peaceful sleep of a child who has, for the first time, glimpsed who she might one day become. A great reciter, a great writer, a great anything. But, first and last, just Anne. With the E, the daughter of Green Gables. It was enough. It would always be enough. Matthew was buried in the small graveyard in Avonlea. Almost everyone in the village came to the funeral. Anne wore a black dress. Marilla wore a black dress. They stood, side by side, at the small grave. Diana stood behind Anne, Diana's hand was on Anne's shoulder. The minister said the words. The grave was filled. The mourners went home. Marilla and Anne walked back to Green Gables together. They walked slowly. They did not speak. Green Gables, when they came home, was the strangest place in the world. Matthew's chair by the kitchen window was empty. Matthew's coat, on the hook by the door, was still there. His old work boots were by the door. His pipe was on the small shelf where he always kept it. Everything was just as he had left it. Only Matthew was gone. Marilla, walking into the kitchen, sat down at the table. She put her face in her hands. She wept. Marilla Cuthbert, who had been a hard woman all her life, who had not cried even at her mother's funeral, who had been strong through every grief that had come to her, Marilla wept. She wept for her brother, her gentle, shy, quiet brother. The brother who had been with her for 60 years, in the same house, in the same kitchen, at the same table. She wept for the life that was ending, the Green Gables that had always been. She wept for Anne, who had lost the only father she had ever had. Anne sat down beside her. Anne put her thin arms around Marilla's shoulders. Anne, who was crying too, said, "Marilla, we have each other. We still have each other." And Marilla, slowly, lifted her face from her hands. She looked at Anne. Anne, with her great gray-green eyes, full of tears. Anne, who had come to them by mistake. Anne, who had become her daughter. Anne, who was, now, the only family Marilla had left in the world. Marilla reached out. She touched Anne's wet cheek with her thin old hand. "Yes, Anne," she whispered. "We have each other. We still have each other." In the weeks that followed, Anne and Marilla learned, slowly, to live without Matthew. It was hard. It was so hard. There were moments, every day, when Marilla would think, "I must tell Matthew about that." And then she would remember. There were moments when Anne, coming into the kitchen, would expect, for 1/2 second, to see him in his chair. And then she would see the empty chair. These moments hurt. They hurt for a long time, but slowly they came less often. Slowly, the missing became less sharp. It became instead a soft, steady, quiet ache. The kind of ache you live with. The kind of ache that becomes part of you. Marilla, who had been strong all her life, started to seem older, smaller, more tired. One evening, in August, Anne came home from a visit to Diana. She found Marilla sitting at the kitchen table, with her head in her hands again. But she was not crying. She was just sitting, very still. "Marilla, are you all right?" Marilla looked up. Her eyes were strange. "Tired, Anne. The doctor was here today. He came to look at my eyes. I have been having trouble. With my eyes, I cannot see, sometimes, things that are close to me," the doctor said. "The doctor said it is getting worse. He said that if I am not careful, in 6 months I may not be able to see at all." Anne's face went pale. "Oh, Marilla, he said that if I rest my eyes completely for 6 months, I might keep what little sight I have, but I cannot read, I cannot sew, I cannot do fine work of any kind." Anne sat down beside her. She took her hand. "Marilla, will you be all right?" "I will manage." "But Anne, I have been thinking about Green Gables, about the farm. With Matthew gone, and with my eyes going, I do not know how I can keep it running. I am thinking that perhaps I should sell it. Sell Green Gables. Move to a small house in town. There is no other way." Anne's heart stopped. Sell Green Gables. Sell the White House with the apple trees. Sell the Snow Queen tree outside her window. Sell the kitchen where Matthew had sat in his chair. Sell the small bedroom where Anne had slept for 5 years. Sell everything. Anne sat there, in shock. Then, slowly, she began to think. She thought about Redmond College, about the scholarship she had won, about going to a real university in the fall, about becoming a writer. She thought about Marilla, who had taken her in when there had been a mistake. Marilla, who had loved her when she had been a strange, thin, freckled child. Marilla, who was now 63, going blind and alone. She thought about Green Gables. She thought very clearly about what mattered. She did not have to think for long. "Marilla," Anne said. Her voice was steady. "I am not going to Redmond. I am going to give back the scholarship. I am going to teach here in Avonlea or in a nearby village. I am going to live at home. With you, we are going to keep Green Gables. Together." Marilla stared at her. "Anne, no, you cannot do that. You cannot give up Redmond. You have worked too hard. You won the Avery Scholarship. You must go." "I will not go, Marilla." "Anne, please. I cannot let you give up everything for me. You are young. You have a future. I will not have you throwing it away on an old half-blind woman." "You are not an old half-blind woman, Marilla. You are my mother, and Green Gables is my home. And I will not leave either of you." Marilla looked at her. She wanted to argue. She wanted to insist. She wanted Anne to go. But Anne had her chin up. The way Anne had her chin up when Anne had decided something. Marilla, who knew that chin very well by now, knew that arguing would do no good. She started to cry. Anne held her. She held Marilla in her arms in the warm kitchen of Green Gables. She said, "Marilla, I am not giving anything up. I am choosing. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. I am choosing Green Gables. I would rather be here with you than anywhere in the world. I will teach. I will work hard. I will study by myself. I will write. The future will still come. It will just come here instead of there." Marilla, in Anne's arms, kept crying. She had not perhaps expected to be loved like this. She had not expected, in her old age, to be saved. She had thought, for many years, that she would be a useful, hard, lonely old woman, that she would help others and ask nothing for herself. She had not known that, in the great economy of love, the love we give comes back to us, sometimes, in ways we do not expect. She had taken in a thin, freckled orphan. She had loved her as much as she could, as much as she knew how. And now the orphan, all grown up, was choosing her, choosing to stay, choosing to be her family, to be the daughter of her old age, to be the light in her dim eyes, to be the voice in her quiet kitchen. "Anne," Marilla whispered, "Anne, I love you, my child." She had never said it before, not once, in 5 years. Anne, with her own tears falling now, said, "I love you too, Marilla. I love you so much." The two of them held each other. The kitchen was warm, the light was soft. Outside, the apple trees were heavy with fruit. The world was going on the way it always did. Sad things and beautiful things and ordinary things, all happening together every day in every house in every village all over the world. But here, in this kitchen, in this small white house, on this small green island, two women, old and young, freckled and gray, sat in each other's arms, and it was enough. It was, somehow, enough. A few days later, Anne walked down the road from Green Gables. In the late afternoon, she had a basket of vegetables for Mrs. Lynde. She walked slowly. The road was familiar. The road was beautiful. The wild roses were blooming along the fence. The clover was thick in the fields. The sky was a deep, clear blue. Anne came around the bend in the road. A young man was walking toward her from the other direction. He was tall. He was carrying a small bag of books. He had curly brown hair and laughing brown eyes. Anne stopped walking. So did he. It was Gilbert Blythe. Anne, who had not spoken to Gilbert in over 5 years, looked at him. Gilbert looked at her. They stood there, in the middle of the road, with the sun setting behind them. Gilbert spoke first. "Anne." His voice was warm. "I heard, in town today, that you have given up Redmond, that you are going to teach here, in Avonlea, so you can stay with Miss Cuthbert." "Yes, Anne. I have given up my position at the Avonlea school. The teacher who was supposed to go to the White Sands School has changed her mind. She is staying in Avonlea." The White Sands School is mine. Anne stared at him. She did not understand. Gilbert, what do you mean? I mean that you should take the Avonlea School, Anne. I have given it up. I have arranged it with the school trustees. They have agreed. The Avonlea School is yours. You can teach here and live at home and walk to school every day. You do not have to go to a school in some faraway village. You can be home with Marilla every night. Anne stood very still. Gilbert had given up his own teaching position for her so that she could be near Marilla. Anne, in that long moment, on the dusty country road, in the soft yellow evening light, understood many things. She understood that Gilbert Blythe had been a good and noble person all along. She understood that she had been, perhaps, a foolish and stubborn girl for 5 long years. She understood that, somewhere along the way, without knowing it, she had been forgiven completely by the boy she had refused to forgive. And she understood that she should, at long last, do the thing she should have done years ago. She held out her hand. "Gilbert," she said softly. "Thank you." Gilbert took her hand. His hand was warm. He held it. He held her hand in the middle of the road in the soft summer light. "Anne," he said, "I have wanted to be your friend for so many years. Will you let me now?" Anne, with her eyes shining, with her thin, freckled face glowing, said, "Yes, Gilbert, I will let you. I would like to be your friend too. I have wanted to for a long, long time. I just did not know how to say it." He smiled, a wide, joyful smile. "Then we are friends now." "Yes, we are friends now." He let go of her hand, slowly, with a soft pressure. They stood there, looking at each other for one moment longer. The world around them was going on. The birds were calling in the trees. The light was turning gold. The dust was settling on the road. And, between them, after 5 years of silence, after 1,000 small misunderstandings, there was, finally, a beginning. It was not a romance, not yet. It was something quieter, something gentler. It was the beginning of a friendship that would last all their lives, a friendship that would, one day, many years later, turn into something more. But Anne did not need to know all that. Yet, she did not need to know what would come. She only needed to know what she knew now. That Gilbert Blythe was her friend, that Marilla was her mother, that Diana was her bosom friend, that Green Gables was her home. That she would walk back to Marilla this evening with the basket emptied and with this new joy in her heart, and she would tell Marilla all about it. And tomorrow she would walk to the small graveyard. She would visit Matthew's grave. She would tell Matthew, too. She had a feeling, somehow, that he would know already. She had a feeling that, somehow, he had been watching all along, from wherever he was, that he had been there, on the dusty road. When she had shaken Gilbert Blythe's hand, that he had smiled. His old, shy, kind smile. Glad that his Anne, his beloved Anne, the strange small girl he had picked up by mistake at the train station, had, at last, made her peace. So, my dear friend, that is the story of Anne Shirley, of how she came to Green Gables by mistake, of how she stayed, of how she grew, through scrapes, through loves, through losses, through joys, of how she became, in the end, the daughter that 2 old people did not know they needed, in the White House with the apple trees, on the small green island, in the middle of an ordinary summer. It is a simple story. It is a story without big battles or great kings or terrible monsters, but it is, perhaps, one of the most beautiful stories ever told, because it shows us something true. It shows us that the people we love do not, always, come the way we expect. Sometimes they come by mistake. Sometimes they come in the wrong shape, or the wrong size, or the wrong color of hair. Sometimes they come with too much talking, and too much imagination, and too many feelings. Sometimes they come thin, and freckled, and angry, and proud. But if we let them in, if we open the door, and bring them home, and give them a small bedroom under the eaves of our house, they will change us. They will name our trees. They will name our roads. They will fill our quiet kitchens with stories we never thought to tell. They will love us in their own strange way, in the only way they know. And slowly, slowly, we will love them back. And we will be a family. And it will be more than we deserved. And it will be all that we needed. Now, my dear listener, I do not know if you are still with me. I hope you have, perhaps, fallen asleep by now. That was, after all, what I was hoping for. That you would let me tell you a long story, in a soft voice, in a quiet room, while you let go of the world, slowly into sleep. If you are still awake, that is fine too. If you are awake, I want you to know, you are loved. I do not know who you are. I do not know what kind of day you have had. I do not know what worries you, or what hurts you, or what makes you smile. But I know that somewhere in the world there is a person or several people who love you. Maybe they are family. Maybe they are friends. Maybe they are people you have not met yet. Maybe even they are people who have already gone, who loved you while they were here, and who are loving you still from wherever they are now. You are not alone. You may feel alone sometimes, especially at night, but you are not. You are part of a great soft web of love that has been spinning around you all your life. You may not see all the threads, but they are there, I promise. If this story has been a comfort to you tonight, please gently, before you close your eyes, do one small thing. Tap the little red button at the bottom of your screen, the subscribe button. Just one tap, soft as a falling leaf. It is how I will find you again, on another quiet night, with another long, slow, gentle story. When you are tired again, when you need a voice in the dark again, when the day has been long and you cannot sleep, and you need someone to tell you a story, I will be here. I will be here, like Green Gables, like the small white house with the apple trees, like the light in the window, always on for the traveler who is coming home very late. I will be here, and the next story will be here, waiting for you. And tap the small heart, if you can, the like button. It is a soft way of saying, I am here, I am listening, thank you for the story. It is the smallest thing in the world, but it matters to me more than you can know. Now, my friend, it is time to sleep. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let your hands rest where they are. Let your face soften. Let your breath slow. Imagine, if you like, a small white house on a small green island. Imagine an apple orchard just past blossom. Imagine a small bedroom under the eaves with a small round window and a great cherry tree just outside the glass. Imagine you are there. Imagine you are safe. Imagine, in the next room, an old kind man sitting in his chair, and an old wise woman making bread at the table. They are your family. They have always been your family. You have been here all along. This is home. This is always and forever home. Good night, my dear friend. Good night, brave heart. Good night, sleeping traveler. May your dreams be soft. May your sleep be deep. May you wake to a beautiful morning. The apple trees are blooming in the orchard. The Snow Queen is whispering outside your window. Anne with the E is making tea in the kitchen, and Marilla is calling you down to breakfast. You are home. Good night. Good night. Good night. Sleep well, my friend. Sleep well.